Okay, so CA1 is out of the door, so that's a relief, right? Okay, so we're going to start a few things for this week and next week. Okay, traditionally, I would run this class that I'm going to conduct this week and next week for the IBC and IBE classes only. But this time around, we decided to pull it to PDP so that everyone can have a go at building your digital portfolios, so it'll be a bit more useful for everyone. So I'm going to try and keep it as lightweight as possible, okay? So it's not too heavy going. But for the IBC, IBE students, this will be extremely handy when you build your own websites for your eventual projects also. But for everybody, it's a start for building your online resumes, online portfolios, okay? So for IBC, IBE, again, if there are any other things that you all want to check in, just come and check in with me during our classes with regards to what we're going to cover today and next week. Okay, so and it's open to anyone else also. If you all want to check in on anything, come find me or make time and then we can talk about it. Okay, so before we start the class good and proper, I thought I'd share with you all a few online portfolios of not really famous people, one or two famous fellas, but it's all personal websites, or if they're not personal websites, they are one-man shows, so we'll just have a look at their own portfolios. Okay, so this is Jonathan Yen, Roots. So again, just look at the structure of the content, right? So all he has is, they've got just a quick write-up on the left, they've got their most recent projects, they've got a little, what we call a hamburger navigation on top, so you click on work. They've got a ton of other things about the past work that they've been doing. Everything you click, it brings to its own page, and then there's a little write-up on what the project is, which is quite important, if not the one who really know what you're doing. And here's his little metadata, right? What disciplines it covered, when it was completed, who the client was, who the other people involved, like the photography was done by someone else. So, and then you just scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down, scroll down. It's a lot of work now, right? And then you scroll back up, and then he's got a nice navigation here which jumps you right back to the top, and then there's something that brings you back to the home page. So again, explore this at your own time. I'll share all these URLs later in the slides. Okay, so that's one, that's Roots, and then here's Alejandre, right? So I think not all of them are native web guys. A lot of them are print, on print. So got noise, sound, fancy things, but it does nothing actually. Sorry, can someone open the door? I think someone making outside. So it's got some fancy interactions, but doesn't do squat, right? So you just got to click on. So it's one unnecessary click away from the actual work. The work is very nice, but your splash screen, just to show off. I guess he did that, which is, there's nothing wrong, I suppose. So all the different clients, you scroll down. It's very nice, very neat. It's all organized. It's a lot of full page, a lot of large size visuals, right? So it's even got preloaders and all that, which we need. It's intense, this website, to say the least. Right? So a lot. So again, I leave this to y'all for y'all to explore on your own time. Here's another one, but you can see how fast or slow a lot of them load. Roots loaded pretty fast because it's quite lightweight. This one got video, got don't know what, got animation and all that, so I suppose it takes a long time to load. So this one, again, is one of those one-page wonders where he tries to, or she, I think it's a he, but anyway, they try and squeeze in everything, most recent work all in there, and there's a contact page right at the bottom, so, and then everything is broken up into case studies, right? So that's another way of doing it. Oh yeah, this one's quite interesting, I think. French dude, or girl. Quite nice, but again, it's a lot of it is also your own branding, your own personality. I guess you can see their personality coming out in their portfolio sites, right? Wow, yeah, very Tron. But I struggle to find my way around this website, to be honest. What do I do? Oh, I scroll down. Okay, so I scroll down. See, so again, again, this guy is I think quite on top of his game. This website is not easy to code the way it's been done. So not to okay, see, yeah, it just suddenly comes back again. Here's another one. I think this is a local designer. This is by far probably a very easy set piece, right? You've got as many columns as you want, say 3-4 columns, and then you use 3 columns for your work, and then you use 1 column for your navigation. So it's a pretty straightforward thing that a lot of templates have. So nothing wrong with that. It's just if you can make it your own, then good, and it's also fairly easy to maintain and update. So again, same pattern. So there's a rollover, and then you get a bit of an indication of what the work is, and then when you click on it, it brings you to the actual work. And then there's a bit of a write-up, and then there's all these visuals, and is there a back to top button? No, but all the work is repeated again at the bottom, right? So you don't have to jump back to the home page. Now I've got a ton of examples. Let me stop at one more, okay? We can do this all day, it's quite fun. But yeah, this one is a bit of a way out thing. This is a UX designer, and there's a lot of her work is here, but it's completely weird, the way that she's laid out and she's presented herself. Now, while all these portfolio sites have one thing in common, which is all of them show off the work that the person has done, right? There's another very important thing also, which you won't realize by just looking at it this way. A lot of them when you resize, they're all mobile friendly. Each and every one of them that we saw, right? So they work at almost any size. This is the narrowest we can probably go. I mean, any kind of website, this is one of the first things that Alfred and I always do. Is it responsive? Is it mobile friendly? And then we just resize. We go nuts resizing our browser windows. Most normal people don't do that, right? But then again, it is just to see how they have flowed their content into, right now on mobile, when someone, let's just look at this user journey, for example, right? You send out your resume, your cover letter with a link to your URL to someone, and then they see it. The chances of them seeing it on their mobile phones are pretty high, right? And then they see it, they click it, and then they see a version of your website that fits on their mobile. They just have a quick glance through, and then they see, oh yeah, this, that, and then there's a quite standard navigation, and then you can see portfolio. They click, and then they carry on that experience. Now this might not be true for everyone. There are some CDs who are fairly dinosaur guys who still will only use their computers, or there might be some people on tablets. So we can't be designing a portfolio just for each size. So we have this overall thing that we call responsive design that we will be covering soon. So I think it's fairly important in today's day and age, when I think in Singapore do you all know what's the mobile adoption rate? How many mobile phones on average a person has? Apparently it's 2.3. In Singapore, on average, everyone has 2.3 phones. I have one phone. I don't know where my other 1.3 phones are, but you look at a family context, right? You might have more than one phone per person overall, right? So you might have a phone for the kid to play around with, one for the grandma to use, which doesn't actually have a line. So a lot of times we end up using our mobiles to actually look for information, to keep up to date, to check Facebook non-stop, to check our emails non-stop if email is a thing. So it is pretty, I would say, very important to actually have your mobile, your portfolio actually work from mobile upwards. And just a bit of a history thing here. So back in the day, I think maybe 10 years ago, desktop was all the rage. Everyone was doing Flash websites, and it was all meant for laptops and those beige gray computers. And then with the iPhone, along came Steve Jobs and how he killed Flash, and then things started becoming very mobile specific. right? So everything that we do now, in fact, we build for mobile first, because if I have a mobile website done, I can view it on a desktop browser or a laptop. But if I have a desktop browser, I'll be pinching my way to no end to actually try and see your content, right? So if you're going to do any one size, it should be mobile. But then again, if you're going to do one size, all that work it doesn't take a lot more work to actually make it a bit more mobile friendly for a few other sizes. So we'll run through that later, okay? Okay, so that's what our lecture today will be about. It is going to be about, let me just resize back my browser. So it's quite nice the way the thing jumps around, right? So anyway, that's a nice trick. So we'll just have a look at this quick video on our addictions to our phones, right?
Today, we'll be discussing something that has become quite prevalent in society, smartphone addiction. Here are some facts for you. 58% of smartphone users don't go more than an hour without checking their phone. The most frequent users are those aged between 18 and 34. There are 6.8 billion smartphones in the world, and only 3.2 billion people own them. For every 100 milliseconds in page load time, sales decrease by 1%. 57% of mobile customers will leave your site if it takes more than 3 seconds for a page to load. 38% of 2-year-olds use mobile devices. Look at these comparisons. It took radio 35 years to reach 50 million users, whereas it only took Facebook 3.5 years. The internet itself took 4 years to reach that milestone, whereas it only took Angry Birds a minuscule 35 days. 89% of students reach for their phone within 15 minutes of waking. 67% of cell owners find themselves checking for messages, alerts, or calls, even when they didn't notice their phone ringing or vibrating. 75% of Americans bring their phone to the bathroom. How do you feel when you misplace your phone? 73% of people feel panicked, where 6% actually feel relieved. Let's count off where US adults use their smartphones the most. 9% use them during sex. There must be some outrageous selfies floating around. 35% in a movie theater, 33% on a date, 32% at their child's school function, 55% unsafely whilst driving, 12% in the shower, and 19% in church.
It's quite sad, I mean, when you when you look at the places where we use all these things, but we've become quite used to and even addicted to it without even realizing it. I'm guilty of a lot of those things. When my phone hasn't gone off for a while, I'll just check it out and like, oh, okay, yeah, there's really nothing going on, but you know, if y'all can, y'all should just try this experiment where you just leave your phones at home for a day and just try and live life. You'll realize that things do, you know, still move on, so it's actually okay. It's not that bad, but yeah, you just be less contactable, which in my case is actually not a bad thing. So yeah, so it's actually not all that horrible, right? So, but again, the importance of mobile cannot be, I can't say more, so it's just that everyone is already on some kind of a mobile device, and mobile doesn't mean small screens all the time, right? Some people who, have you all seen these tourists take pictures with their iPads? I think maybe it's just they think the picture is clearer because they can see more of it. I don't know, but anyway, mobiles also count tablets, the in-between sizes, your tablets, like your massively sized Samsungs and the new iPhones also. So any kind of device that doesn't need to be pinned down or is not too heavy to be carried around is considered mobile already, right? So let's get on with the class good and proper. We're going to cover a bit on responsive design today, okay? So what we're going to knock off today is identify the basic principles of responsive web design. So, responsive web design, what is responsive in this context? Because you'll hear me say, you might hear a lot of people also say responsive web, responsive, when, what does it actually mean, right? In short, it is actually just websites that respond to the device that it's being seen on, right? So that's literally it, that's where the word came from, right? It is actually flexible layouts, that's what we actually mean. Flexible layouts that work on mobile, desktop, or any other device. When we mean any other device, there are even mobile layouts that respond to Apple Watches, even that tiny round circle, so they decide what content to switch on and switch off so that it will fit on that side. So the old practice was to build one website for every different possible kind of device size. So there'll be one desktop version website, and then there'll be one mobile-friendly website. But that means you're building two different sites and taking twice as much time. Whereas responsive is a little bit easier in that sense. Why responsive? We covered earlier about how why we need responsive, because back in the day this was all that we had. I think the beginnings of the internet was, the screen resolutions were quite nonsense. Like it was 640 by 480. I still remember my big beige box monitor that was heavier than me. But that was it. That was the only place where we used the internet or we used the computer for anything. People used to actually switch on the computer. If you all watch old movies from the 90s, you all will see any kind of office will have a computer inside there, but it's never switched on one. So they will only switch it on when they need to, track down the bad guys or look like they're doing something useful. So they used to consume a lot of power, but things progress. Like you have bigger monitors, better resolutions, faster hardware, but it was going bigger and bigger, and then suddenly it started going very small with our mobile devices, right? And screens today, you cannot, there's just no way of counting the different sizes of screens that we have. Because last time when we had, like when I was saying there was a 640 pixels by 480 was the resolution, every website was designed for that size. There was no bigger, no smaller, right? So, and then when screen technology improved, some manufacturer will bring in an 800 by 600 dimension screen, and then you change your design for that. So we kept doing that, we kept chasing for the next size. It was 1024, 768, and then we started having the HD ones, which were 16:9, so it was 1280, 720. You see, these numbers are still going to my head. And then with an array like this, and this is just from 4 or 5 years ago, we've got even more screens now. It's just impossible to keep track and do a design for every specific screen. So it becomes more and more important that we find an easier way to streamline what we do, right? So the philosophy behind responsive is just this, right? I don't know why Bruce Lee is here, but he's here, and we like using Bruce Lee a lot. So his famous word: when you pour water into a cup, it becomes the cup. And then it becomes the bottle, and it becomes the teapot. So it's literally taking the shape of the container it's in. Like, it doesn't have any size or shape. So the same way we try and treat web content like water. Whatever screen size that you have, you try and let it fill in the space as cleverly as you can, and prioritizing what needs to be shown, right? So you've got to start designing how your content will flow. You've got to design what it looks like, yes, but while you're doing that, you also need to thinking about what comes first, what comes second when your screens start getting narrower and narrower, right? So breakpoints. Breakpoints are a very important concept in responsive design. Breakpoints essentially mean the size of the screen when the layout has to change, right? So for example, let's fire up our browsers. Let's just open up our browsers and we play with this. Let's go to Lufthansa.com. So I'm viewing Lufthansa. I hope it still works. It should, yeah, it does. So this is my maximum browser size, right? Again, just remember, we are resizing browsers just to investigate what goes on. Normal people don't do that, okay? So when I start narrowing my browser window a bit, nothing changes, nothing changes, nothing changes. They've designed it for a certain minimum size, right? You can see the panel here, the navigation here, and all that, they stretch out to a certain degree. Now when it hits a certain size, and then suddenly something also kind of changes. I think something is supposed to be there, but it's not loading. Right, so the layout kind of changes a little bit. It's kind of flexible to what we can do. And we keep going narrower and narrower and narrower. We keep going narrower. So you can see how at the bottom, this is the biggest change here so far. When I kept going narrower, right, there are 3 columns here, and then it snaps to 2. Because after a certain size, you keep trying to squeeze 3 columns narrower, it's going to be useless, right? It's going to be either the text is going to be too small or the columns are going to be too narrow. So we keep going narrower and narrower. I think the biggest change will come on top, where after a certain size, they're not going to show the image and the search side by side. They're going to start prioritizing. They're going to say, okay, I'm going to put the search on top, and then the branding message will go below, because needs analysis, right? They figured out that maybe people who come to the website are there to book tickets first. So then they start prioritizing what they should be showing, and everything becomes a nice dandy single column thing, and it all just works. Everything is just stacked up. So if you look at content on your website as boxes, and they're all boxes, we've all been dealing with boxes, divs, spans, everything is a damn box, right? So you've got to start thinking about how the boxes are going to resize and what is going to stack on top of each other. Okay, so that's Lufthansa. Another nice example is Carousel. So pretty straightforward. You know, they've got rows of content. This one is actually a bit easier to figure out, right? So they've got one row on top, and then they've got another row which is a search bar, and then there's another row which is the navigation here, and then they've got another row which has 2 images. So again, let's do the same thing, right? Maximum. This is all the maximum it goes. It actually doesn't change size until you start narrowing it down a bit. Then the column here changed right at the bottom. Just watch out for the bottom here. There'll be things that will. It's actually a long page, so there are a lot of other things that change as we start resizing it. So here you have a panel on the left, but when you go narrower, the panel, what happens? The panel can't just disappear, right? They probably hid it somewhere, which I haven't figured out yet. Oh, view more, is it? No, I don't know. Anyway, I'm not in charge of the carousel website. I don't have to care that much. So as you go narrower and narrower, you can start seeing things change. Now it becomes a narrower thing, even for a device that can work. So they kind of have like 4 different sizes that you can have a look at. We'll come to what the 4 sizes are. So as you go narrower, here's the 3rd one, or 4th. So let's look at this, right? So this is one size. This one kind of stays and stays in that size. It just expands proportionately, and then there's another breakpoint here where the layout kind of changes, where instead of one narrow column, everything stacked up. Now there's one big image and there are 2 images below it. And then we keep dragging and dragging. When we see where the layout will break, then we see here's another breakpoint, right? So breakpoints are labeled, so they have 4 different breakpoints. Breakpoints are when the content becomes when the design becomes too silly to stay in that view thing. Can you imagine if we had this layout for the narrow ones? It'll just be scaled down and nothing will be legible. So there comes a point where you decide, oh, roughly for large desktop screens, I'll have this one layout, and then for tablets, maybe it's this layout. This is tablets, maybe horizontal or landscape. So, and then this other size might be for tablets when they are in portrait, and then this one is for mobiles, mobile devices or handheld devices that are just narrow screens, right? So this is carousel. So there's another example. Let's just hit ASOS. Okay, there are some sites. A lot of times when you resize and resize and resize, you will see things, but then this one nothing happens there. But let's give it a try. If you all have your mobile phones, right, just open up asos.com on your mobile phones and see whether it actually works. How does it look like? It's completely different, right? It's a very storefront looking thing, right? Do they start with how does it look like now? Anyone? Oh, so you've got to choose and sign in. Then can you just click on shop men or shop women? Either one is fine. Okay. So, the thing about online shopping websites is that there's a lot of research that goes into the kind of users who come to their websites, right? So your ASOS.coms, your Amazons, they don't actually do responsive designs. They don't. They have another thing which we call adaptive design, where on the server actually tries to figure out what kind of device is asking for the website, and they will give a custom version for that device. This is because when people are the research is this, when someone is using their laptop or their desktop to actually go to a shopping website, they may not be that inclined to buy stuff. They might be doing research. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into the desktop versions of the website. When people are using their mobiles or their tablets, they are a lot more inclined to actually make a purchase. Can you imagine just lying down in bed, just going through, it's like, yes, it's there. I might, there's a higher likelihood of you actually adding stuff to your cart or actually bookmarking something to buy later. So a lot of the e-commerce websites, their mobile device websites tend to be very transaction oriented. So they will start giving you, there's a lot less content, there's a lot less curation, it'll go usually straight into buying stuff. So it's again, it depends a lot on the research for your, and the needs analysis for your individual sites. But we are talking about portfolios, so either way, I think portfolios, wherever someone is looking at it, there's a likelihood that they are going to look at your work, right? So make the work as easy to find as possible. Okay, so again, not every website will respond to your browser resizing, but it doesn't mean that they're not mobile friendly. They might be, it's just it's not there yet. It's not visible on your browser yet. There's another quick way to actually try it out. If you're on Chrome, I think you can right click, choose inspect, and then look for the mobile icon on the top left, the second icon, toggle device toolbar. So you click that, and then your browser will change into a mobile version, but you got to click reload, and then it will show you the mobile version on your desktop. So this is how, when testing for adaptive designs, this is what we do. Everything in your browser it can be actually done to simulate or emulate a mobile device. Okay, let's get back to this. Right, so we had a look at how Lufthansa responded to our browser resizing. We saw how Carousel responded to our browser resizing. We saw how ASOS didn't respond to our browser resizing because they have a different bunch of tricks up their sleeve, right? Up their sleeves. So again, these guys, they are all listed on the stock exchange. They have a ton of resources, so they can do these things and they will do these things to optimize purchase. So again, another reminder, browser resizing is not regular behavior. We do it to test, we do it to see, but when most users, they jump into it, their browsers are usually almost maximized or close to full screen, right? So we work with the assumption that everyone, especially mobile devices, you can't really resize your browser window. It's going to take up as much screen estate as it can to show you the full experience. Okay, but we do resize in order to just test, because we don't have all the different devices in the world at our fingertips. I think there are some agencies where they have, in my previous agency also, we used to have a device lab where any kind of second-hand, anyone is upgrading their phones, we go to Sungai Road and try and look for all the old phone models, and we just buy them for cheap, for $5, $10, and we have a collection of all these devices for us to test. Because when you are doing something that's say an e-commerce website or even an airline booking engine, you need to make sure that it works on a lot of the modern devices or even older devices, because the clients were big. I mean, for example, if you're looking at an airline, you have people who are buying tickets not just from Singapore but from third world countries, first world countries. So we had to simulate a lot of these things. We had about close to 90 devices. Some of them hardly work. But anyway, we don't need to go to that extent. But everything we need is in our browsers already. Okay, so there's this other thing which is what we call patterns for responsive design. Patterns are essentially how you can break down layout and see how it can fit. There are a couple of ways where people try and collapse a wide-looking website into a narrower thing. For example, we look at Carousel, we just analyze it as there's a masthead area on top, there's an image highlight which is split into two columns, and then there's one column, one column, one column. And then how do we resize this for smaller devices? That's something we can start thinking about. So there are some different patterns that we have. So this is called a somewhat fluid layout. So on the extreme right is your desktop browser. Extreme left is your device, your mobile devices, the smallest ones. And the green boxes are just possible layouts. You know how we cut it up into boxes just now. So let's go to this URL. It's just a good explanation of the oops, let me switch off my mobile view. Okay, we look at this website, they have a navigation on top, there's a big image, and then like 3 columns. So when we look at their mobile versions, as we grow narrower and narrower, they just make small tweaks for the columns start changing, right? So I can look there and do this. So as we grow narrower, we can see how what used to be 3 columns start stacking up on top of each other, right? So these are what we call patterns, where we maybe look at our content and we see, okay, so I've got 1 big column on top and 2 columns below. As I grow narrower, maybe it can still fit the narrower devices. And then up to a point only, when it's a very narrow device, then you got to start looking at how you got to stack up. The light green one goes to the middle, the even lighter one goes right to the bottom. So this is the simplest way of resizing stuff. And then you've got things like news columns for news websites, where they will start with 3 columns on the extreme end. And then as it goes narrower, it becomes 2 columns, and then it starts stacking up because they want to keep the integrity of the headlines large, so that they will start rearranging things that way. So these are my favorite, where, let's go to this website, Friendly Future. Friendly Future Web. Wait. So this layout, it's just 1 column, it doesn't do anything. They've locked it down to a narrow one, and as you grow narrower, it just flows into the device. So these can be quite hard to pull off, but it still can be done. It's a fairly simple layout, right? So anytime you go narrow, it just goes narrow lock. They just squeeze everything in. This might be the holy grail in terms of trying to do something simply, but the layout isn't always very interesting, right? So there are tiny tweaks, and then this might be quite familiar. We have what we call off canvas. I think this is something that if you use the Facebook app or anything that has a burger menu, a lot of times when you go narrow into mobile, the left-hand side, which is the navigation, the light green portion there, it will become something that is off-screen, so that you save space, so that when you tap your 3 horizontal lines, that it will slide in and slide out. So these can be quite complex, where you have something that is kind of hidden off-screen. Okay, so now we get into very quickly on the basic tools for building responsive. Okay, in your normal HTML, whatever you did in 2DMG, there are 1 or 2 things that you just need to add on for whatever you're doing to be responsive. The first thing is this tag called viewport. So it's under your meta tag. You've got to stick this whole line in so that your web pages don't scale. If you don't have this, your websites will just scale to the size of the device. When you have this, it won't scale. It will stay at a 1.0 scale. The next thing that we need to put in is this goes into your CSS files. This is called your add media, right? So add media, you can see the code below, where we can start looking at the width of the screen. So this actually does the dirty work of detecting how wide your screens are. 600 pixels, then you do this. If they are 1024 pixels wide, then you do that. So this is where most of the hard work happens in terms of the HTML and the CSS, right? So here's how we generally perceive our designs to be like. Okay, so we build for 1024 pixels wide, that's the widest one, right? And then there are narrow ones, which is your 768 width, which is your iPads and your tablets. And then there are 480 or 320, which is your handphones, like your cell phones, right? So that's the 3 narrowest ones. So when it comes to making your viewports, what we do is we build for this size first, and then in our CSS we call, the media screen size should be a maximum width of 480, then you do all these things. And then for the larger size, which is your 768, the media query will change to, the screen size will be between 481 and 768, so it doesn't include the 480. And then for 1024, it's just as long as it's bigger than 769, then follow these rules. So CSS is just a set of rules, right? So all this can be quite painful, but again, the sizes that we were looking at here, they're all based on a general idea of what your desktop sizes are, your tablet sizes are, your phone sizes are. But a lot of times you need to base your breakpoints on what your user needs are, right? So you might have users who only either check on your mobiles or desktops. There's no tablet, there's no in between. That's fine too. Again, it depends on your research. If you find out that no one actually uses your website on desktop, then forget about the desktop versions. Just do your cell phone and your tablet versions, right? So it's sometimes just because someone else did it, it's not a good enough reason to also do the same thing. Like you need to base it on what you actually need, what your purpose is. Again, we also this goes back to deciding on what your breakpoints are. Like there are some sites which just focus on a narrow version, which stays narrow until you hit a desktop version, right? So there's nothing wrong with that. Because there are so many different possibilities for screen sizes, like we were saying, all the different screen sizes, even for desktops, you've got 1280 width, you've got 1440, and then you start looking at Retina, which just goes nuts into the, it's just literally double the size. So a lot of these things, there are a lot of things to actually worry about. So on that note, there's a lot of reading that can be done on responsive design. So I think our library has a lot of these things. Go check them out and see what they have. So that was part one, right? It's how painful it is to actually make everything responsive. It really is painful. You want to go, you got to figure out all the different sizes. You got to go one by one. You got to do all these things. It's really a drag, and it's going to be feeling like, if you build 2 websites and it takes you 2 days. The responsive version also feels like it might save you like 2-3 hours on 2 days. So this is where part 2 comes in, where we talk about frameworks, right? So for this second part, it's very quick. We're just going to recognize the importance of using frameworks and explore the features of using a framework. Now before we get into that, we need to talk about this very important thing, right? It's called the leftover principle, and it has everything to do with this. Have you all seen it? So, leftover principle is something that that's used a lot in recent times, like a lot of discussions when it comes to artificial intelligence. I was going to say automatic intelligence. So, what has the leftover principle got to do with the Avengers? So, I hope you all have seen some parts of the Avengers or know what is going on. So, essentially what happens in the Avengers is this. I'll give you a 1-minute breakdown, right? So, there's Tony Stark, who is Iron Man, has a suit and it does all these things. And then, so he got lazy and he was like, he has Jarvis, this artificial intelligence bot that does a lot of things for him. So, he thought maybe why not I just program the artificial intelligence to do everything for me, so I don't have to worry about anything. So then he ended up with this character, Ultron, which was an embodiment of the artificial intelligence, which did everything that you needed to do. It took care of everything by itself, right? So Ultron was fully autonomous, it was automatic, it did everything on its own, you didn't have to worry about much because it will make all the decisions for you. It ended up being so complex that eventually, this is a spoiler, that they couldn't control Ultron, they had to go and destroy it, right? So in the end, it seems like whatever that you do, when you don't have control over what is actually going on, then it just goes completely batshit, right? So in this example. On the other hand, Iron Man, he is a mixture of a few things. He's a mixture that the baseline is that Tony Stark is essentially a fairly smart guy, right? He can calculate things like power, trajectory, where he's going to land, what he's going to do all on his own. But the thing is, the suit can do these things for him so that he can worry about other things like, how to take down the bad guys or what kind of formation he should be flying at in order to take out the bad guys and all those things. So the suit does all the calculations while he worries about the slightly bigger level stuff. So that's where things, the leftover principle comes in, is that when we start automating things, right? Things that are simple to do, things that can be repeatedly done in a very efficient manner. That's the stuff that we automate. That's the stuff that we let the machines do, let the robots do. Then we worry about the other stuff that cannot be automated. So in our perspective, I think the stuff that robots can do, we already have things like, Photoshop, Dreamweaver that can build entire websites for you. But when it's time to actually try and figure out what went wrong or what didn't happen according to what you planned, it's very hard to go in and try and debug it. It's very hard to go in and fix it, which is why we tend to stay away from Dreamweaver. It gives you a lot of things, but a lot of things end up looking the same again and again and again. But what we can automate will be things like building HTML, which is what I'm coming to learn, right? So this whole long story about Ultron and Iron Man is that we have things called frameworks and web frameworks, which take away all the redundant stuff and the painful stuff that we have to do again and again and again, right? So think of frameworks as base structures that you can start working off, right? So instead of building and writing your own HTML from scratch, someone has written like maybe half of it for you, right? So why use frameworks? The framework is when I say frameworks, it's actually just a collection of very simple code, right? For when it comes to HTML. The benefit of using a framework is that you don't have to do things from scratch every time. Like you have a base to start from. There's also browser compatibility. Now, when we spoke about responsive earlier, and I was only using Chrome, right? Eventually, you will have to test for Firefox. You will have to test for Safari. You will have to test for mobile Firefox. You will have to test for mobile Safari. The list does not end. I'm not even going into Windows yet. There are like 5 versions of Windows that no one likes and 1 version that is by default now. So frameworks take care of compatibility for you. They have done all the dirty work. They have done all the fixes. With frameworks, you can also work collaboratively, right? So you have the same starting point, you have the same set of files. More than one person can jump in and do different things with it. And it lets you stay sane and you can work a bit faster. And you will get to see why when we come to the demo later, okay? There are bad things about using frameworks, right? The bad thing is that you don't get, there's a bit more time that you need to spend to figure it out. Because different frameworks are done differently from everything else. Everyone has a different way of starting out. I don't know what I meant by this. You don't learn to do stuff yourself. Yeah, okay, so the thing about frameworks is this. When someone has done things for you, it's a bit like Ultron, right? When someone does the simple stuff for you, you don't know how it is done because the framework kind of blocks it away from you. You just take the easy bits and you put it together. It's like playing with Lego, but do you know how hard it is to actually fabricate a small Lego piece? Right? If you want to, at the factory level, we don't really care about it, but the fact that someone has made the easy stuff completely invisible to you, you might not know what are the things that go on underneath it. So that may be a drawback of using frameworks, but I think we can live with it, right? And there's also a lot of unused markup when you're using frameworks. Now, frameworks give you a ton of things that you can use for building your websites. For example, the framework we will explore later, it has columns, it has buttons, it has drop downs, it has all manner of things, like it has forms, it has styled forms, unstyled forms. But then again, when I don't use forms for my website, it's still there. The code is still lingering around somewhere, right? So it adds to a bit of file size, things get a bit bigger than you need to, but again, it is one of the drawbacks for making life a little bit simpler. There are a couple of responsive frameworks out there. There's this thing called HTML5 boilerplate, which I used to use, but I don't like anymore. There's Skeleton, which is actually very easy to use, but it lacks a lot of power that we need. And then there's Bootstrap. I think Bootstrap is the one that is commonly used in industry, and it's once you get the hang of it, there's a slight learning curve, but it's actually not that bad. You all have been through WebP, so you all know what is going on. So this will be a fairly easy getting up to speed thing, hopefully. Why Bootstrap is because it's by default it is sleek and plain. There isn't a lot of JavaScript needed at all, without any programming. Okay, so HTML isn't programming, and HTML is just markup. It's just like creating a document. Programming is JavaScript, and it doesn't have the pain of using JavaScript. And Bootstrap is actually open source, which means when the person, it's actually built by Twitter, by the way, Bootstrap. They were building their own websites and they needed a framework because they were doing the same things again and again and again. they were building 500 different pages, and you can't be building 500 different pages from scratch. So they built a framework, and every page that they built uses this framework to actually be a responsive website. So even if Twitter dies, they get, they burn up, they get delisted from the stock exchange. It's open source, the code is out there for everyone, and you can download it and it's yours to use. There's no royalty or licensing that comes with it. And the other great thing is that there's excellent documentation on Bootstrap. I learned Bootstrap all on my own. There were a lot of code that I copied from other people, but the documentation itself has so many things that you can copy paste, it works, and you can start tweaking it on your own already. Okay, so maybe we should take a break now. Yeah, let's take a break now, and then we will come back. Now it's 10:10. Let's come back at 10:40, and then we will get into the deep end of things.